Reaching out, China's foreign ministry announces President Xi Jinping's first visit as head of state to Russia and then to the African continent. The United States launches another missile defense satellite aimed at detecting and tracking missiles right around the globe. This one can reach up to 80% of all global territory. Fresh figures show China's manufacturing sector has picked up in March, indicating the country's economy is well on track for a full recovery. And it's the wrath of Mother Nature. 8 people are killed and more than 100 injured in a hailstorm in China's southern city of Dongguan. It is noon here in Beijing. 60 minutes of the best stories from China, Asia and right around the world. We'll have a special report a little later on here on the News Hour about the cyber attacks which completely blockaded major broadcasters as well as banks in South Korea. And in the latter half of the program, we will have the top business as well as sports stories. But first up on the News Hour, we will be talking about Chinese President Xi Jinping, who will be leaving for Russia this Friday to start what is going to be his first overseas visit as China's new head of state. China's foreign ministry says President Xi will then visit Tanzania, South Africa and the Republic of Congo. While in South Africa, he will be attending the 5th BRICS leaders meeting in Durban. In Russia, in Moscow, he will meet his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. The visit aims to promote the China-Russia strategic partnership. President Xi Jinping's African trip aims to promote cooperation with African countries in the respect that China is the largest developing country in the world, while Africa is home to the largest number of developing countries. While in Africa, Xi Jinping will also meet with the leaders of the so-called BRICS countries during the 5th Leaders Summit in Durban, South Africa.
Nearly 20 events are packed into 1.5 days. President Xi Jinping will be very busy talking to Russian leaders and attending ceremonial events. This time, he's bringing more than just reassurances on political relations.
Both presidents are expected to sign a manifesto spelling out the directions for the future development of Sino-Russian relations and key cooperation fields between the two countries.
President Xi's visit will further promote and deepen cooperation between the two countries and translate the good political atmosphere into practical cooperation projects.
There has been some debate on China-Russia ties, questioning why the political intimacy hasn't translated into enough practical benefits for the two sides. But this time, the two neighbors have set a tone of practicality for President Xi's visit.
The two countries share great potential in cooperating in energy, aerospace, aviation, investment and other fields. The relevant Chinese firms are all in Moscow making continual progress with negotiations. They're trying to reach an agreement to increase oil transactions and build pipelines in eastern China and Russia and sign the relevant contracts.
President Xi will then continue his multi-nation tour to South Africa to attend the 5th BRICS summit. Deepening financial cooperation will be one of the major topics during the summit. Accompanying President Xi will be China's new First Lady, Ms. Peng Liyuan, someone eager media outlets will surely be waiting to snap a photo of. The First Lady used to be a very popular folk singer in China, but has rarely hit the stage in recent years. During their visit, Ms. Peng Liyuan will join other First Ladies in several activities. British newspaper The Financial Times believes Ms. Peng Liyuan will be a new force behind China's soft power. Wang Xinye, CCTV.
Chinese President Xi Jinping will also give a speech to students at the Moscow College of International Relations. The college, which is in the southwest suburbs of Moscow, is Russia's most famous as well as most influential educational institute when it comes to international relations and humanities. Some of its prominent alumni includes the current Foreign Minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov. Many Chinese students will be among the 1,000-plus audience, and the speech will also be recorded, so those who cannot attend it live will be able to watch it on the internet.
I
want to know what kind of person Xi Jinping is as ordinary person, not just his role as a president. What he has to say and how he thinks about life and our country and our lives.
I hope to see how this high-level visit promotes further military cooperation, political communication and cultural exchange.
Now, Sino-Russian relations have maintained a good momentum of growth in the past several years. As our Nia Jia tells us, mutual political trust has deepened as well as economic cooperation improved.
Good neighbors, friends, and partners. Close Sino-Russian relations have seen steady progress. 12 years ago, China and Russia signed a 20-year political treaty of friendship and cooperation. During Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to Beijing in October 2004, an agreement was signed settling a long-standing dispute over the shared 4,300-kilometer border. Since 1996, leaders from the countries met with each other at least twice a year, including at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summits. Analysts say this demonstrates that the bilateral relationship hinges on a strong legal understanding and is based on extensive and long-term strategic interests of the two countries.
As major powers in the world and permanent members of the UN Security Council, China and Russia share the same or similar positions on many international and regional issues. They oppose unilateralism and hegemony and promote a multipolar world. They do not seek an alliance, but cooperate for safety and stability.
Booming economic and trade cooperation is a driving force behind their relations. This centers around energy, as China is one of the largest consumers of Russian oil. Last year, the trade volume between China and Russia reached a historical high of $88.2 billion, up 11.2% from the year before. China is now Russia's largest trading partner. Both sides hope to boost their bilateral trade volume to over $100 billion this year. However, there is still much to be achieved in terms of Sino-Russian strategic cooperation.
The two peoples should increase exchanges, which have not been as intensive as intergovernmental activities. Only people-to-people understanding can lay a more solid foundation for the sound development of bilateral ties.
And a key step in boosting this traditional friendship and strengthening trust was through cultural promotion. The Year of Russia was held in China in 2006, while Russia hosted the Year of China in 2007. The new Chinese President Xi Jinping will begin his official state visit to Russia on Friday. This will be the first country he visits after taking office before heading to BRICS Summit in South Africa. Many expect that visit to be an important one in setting the tone of relations between China and Russia in the new era. As comprehensive strategic partners, the two giant neighbors are fulfilling their pledge of friends forever, enemies never. Ye Jiang, CCTV, Beijing.
Now, the number of tourists traveling between China and Russia demonstrates just how close these two countries are, not just physically, but also people to people. China is now Russia's second biggest source of tourists, while Russians are China's third biggest source. While sightseeing is always very popular, culture and customs keep people coming back for more. Guan Yang reports from Harbin, which is one of China's major cities closest to Russia.
It really doesn't matter if you can't speak Russian. The music and dance will tune you in. It's not even the holiday season yet, but this traditional folk dance is pulling in the crowds. At one of the Harbin's hottest Russian theaters, you can really feel the passion. It is as if you were in Moscow. 40 minutes drive from bustling downtown, the Volga Manor offers a quiet and relaxing afternoon, surrounded by exquisite Russian art. It attracts many visitors, some from much warmer climates.
Initially, when we built the manor, it was based on the idea of combining Harbin's history with its Russian legacy. But as the place was developing, we thought why not turn the business into a grand Russian cultural banquet. It's attracted thousands of visitors each year, especially from tropical Southeast Asia.
There are stores selling Russian dolls and, of course, vodka. But the 600,000 square meter wonderland also provides a stunning setting for anyone who wants to find more about the world's largest country by geographical area. There's even a replica of the famous St. Nicholas Church.
Harbin's original St. Nicholas Church was destroyed during the Cultural Revolution. All the interior fittings in this replica have actually been imported from Russia. When the first generation of Russians emigrated to Harbin, they brought very little except their religion, so we have brought back their original roots.
It's not all about enjoying the replicas. Many choose to spend their whole holiday here, as if they were in Russia itself.
Harbin is the capital of Heilongjiang province, which shares a border with Russia that runs over 3,000 kilometers. This geographical privilege allows us to fully explore the potential for tourism development. Deepening cultural exchanges is what made our business such a success.
And more projects like this are needed to tap the huge tourism potential of the two neighboring giants. It is hoped the building of the more vulgar manors will help boost the development of the Sino-Russian tourism. Guanyang, CCTV.
All right, we'll have extensive coverage here on CCTV News of President Xi's first state visit. But coming up on the other side here on the News Hour, the United States launching another missile defense satellite aimed at detecting and tracking missiles right around the globe. U.S. officials say 80% of global territory is covered by this new GEO-2. And a British minister, Hugo Swire, declares India a safe place to travel despite a recent string of sexual assaults on women. Those stories when the News Hour returns. Welcome back. The big story in Northeast Asia that we're tracking this morning. The DPRK is suspected of causing a major cyber attack which brought down computer networks at major South Korean banks as well as broadcasters. It also paralyzed cash machines right across South Korea. Screens went blank at 2 p.m. local time Wednesday. The blackout lasted more than 7 hours, one of the largest that South Korea has ever seen of this kind. South Korean officials haven't been able to immediately determine responsibility, and the state media in the DPRK have made no comment so far, but some experts suspect the attack was orchestrated by Pyongyang. The peninsula rivals have been exchanging threats during the current joint U.S. and South Korean military drills, as well as in the wake of the recent UN sanctions against the DPRK. The network paralysis took place just days after the DPRK accused both South Korea and the United States of staging their own cyber attack, which shut down North Korean government websites for 2 days last week. The South Korean shutdown did not affect government agencies or potential targets like power plants and transport systems. There are no reports that bank customer records were compromised, but the disruption did freeze a part of South Korea's commerce on Wednesday. For more on this, and this is a fairly unprecedented cyber attack on South Korea, let's go straight across to our correspondent Eugene Jung, who's joining us live from Seoul, both in scale and in severity. I don't know when was the last time South Korea saw something like this. Tell us how badly it affected normal life, and more importantly, what are South Korean authorities now saying? How confident are they that they can trace this back to Pyongyang?
Right, Zaka. The Korea Communications Commission, the National Police Agency, and the Korea Internet Security Agency, they formed a task force team to deal with this very serious issue of cyber attacks on Wednesday. Yesterday, 3 major broadcasters, KBS, MBC, and YTN, as well as 3 banks, Shinhan, Nonghyup, and Jeju, and other firms in South Korea experienced unprecedented computer network failures at around the same time, at 2 p.m. Wednesday, local time. Now, over 32,000 computers and servers were affected on Wednesday as a result in 6 organizations. TV broadcasts were not affected directly, but we saw on the news that reporters had a hard time transmitting data to each other, printing because of the network failure, and even had to write up their articles by hand. Now, KBS and MBC said this morning that most of their internal networks have now been recovered, so news broadcasts are running as usual, but they will still have difficulty recovering data lost in individual computers. The Korea Communications Commission says they're still working on identifying the source of the malicious codes that contaminated the computers and servers. They say there are reasons to believe that the attacks may have originated from the DPRK, but the Korea Communications Commission says they're keeping all options open at this time. According to Yonhap News Agency, the presidential office said Pyongyang's involvement has not yet been determined. Zaka?
All right, it's probably a sign of the future wars and how it's going to be fought, not so much on the battlefield, but certainly on the internet. Stay with us, Eugene Jung. Let's go back to conventional military-style warfare. That's also another big story developing from the Korean Peninsula. The 11-day joint U.S.-South Korean military drill known as Key Resolve. It'll finish later today. And just one day before the end of that joint drill, a U.S. nuclear attack submarine anchored at Busan. Since the beginning of this month, both the U.S. and South Korea have organized a series of military drills testing equipment capable of delivering nuclear weapons. And that includes the deployment of B-52 bombers. Media in the DPRK has slammed these drills. They're calling them preemptive measures aimed at the DPRK. Meanwhile, the top leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Kim Jong-un, has supervised a drone attack on a simulated South Korean target during a military exercise. Now, this is the first time that the DPRK has disclosed photographs of an actual deployment of its drones. Pyongyang's KCNA news agency says the armed forces also shot down a target mimicking a cruise missile on Wednesday. It says Kim Jong-un expressed great satisfaction with the exercise. Media in South Korea say the DPRK has stepped up its military exercises in response to the joint drills by South Korea and the United States. Earlier in the day, KCNA denounced U.S. moves, saying they're aimed at staging a preemptive nuclear strike on the DPRK, citing the deployment of American B-52 bombers over the Korean Peninsula. And for more on this, we can speak to our correspondent Eugene Jung again in Seoul. Just before these exercises began, there was a lot of rhetoric coming from the north side, threatening to tear up the armistice, threatening to go to war and so on. Now that these exercises are virtually coming to an end, is there a sense of relief and satisfaction that for the large part, it's passed off peacefully?
Well, the Key Resolve exercise came to an end today. The DPRK has been sending harsh rhetoric towards South Korea and the United States for holding this exercise, which the U.S. and ROK has repeatedly said is routine and defensive in nature. South Koreans first believed the DPRK could conduct a provocation during the Key Resolve exercise, but later they forecasted that Pyongyang would wait until the U.S. and ROK joint military exercises come to an end and wait until a majority of the U.S. forces involved in these exercises pull out of the Korean Peninsula, and then with the attempt a provocation. Now, we can only wait and see if this would turn out to be true. The South Korean media are also keeping a close eye on the DPRK's movements and reporting it to the locals. On Thursday, this morning, local news reported that the DPRK's TV and radio broadcaster, the Korea Central Television, issued an air raid alert for 1 hour in the DPRK. In what local news believes to have been a form of training and not the real thing. But we can see that the local media are keeping a close watch on the DPRK's movements. Now, when the cyber attack on major broadcasters and banks took place yesterday, many South Koreans experienced problems at a personal level. Many bank users were not able to use their debit cards, for instance, and they couldn't withdraw money from their accounts for that particular afternoon. Now, many people seem to suspect the DPRK. Now, that's because we've seen a lot of threats and also the tensions rising on the Korean Peninsula. But one person told me that even if it isn't the DPRK, it's still very scary to see that the media and banks could all shut down at a push of a button. So there is some level of tension felt at a civilian level in South Korea, but we're not seeing any rising tensions or fears among the civilians as they suspect for possible warfare between the two Koreas.
And that's the hard thing, isn't it? I mean, you can't necessarily trace these attacks back to a particular country. You could be sitting anywhere in the world with an IP address from any other part of the world, and that's why it becomes so hard to track these things. Thanks very much for joining us. That's Eugene Jung, our correspondent, joining us live from Seoul, giving us details and perspective about both those military exercises. The Key Resolve ended today, and also more importantly, that major cyber attack that happened and shut down some of the major banks as well as broadcasters in Seoul. Let's get a view from the other side. Let's go across to Pyongyang. Our correspondent Raphael Warber, he's a senior video journalist with the Associated Press. He now joins us live. We want to first talk about these annual drills, the Key Resolve. There was a lot of rhetoric from the north side even before these drills began. Now that these drills have passed off, in hindsight, I'm just curious as to why there was so much hubris about it this time around, because these exercises happen every year. It's an annual exercise by the U.S. and South Korea. Why was Pyongyang getting so jittery about it this time around?
Well, in the past 24 hours, there have been two major statements from North Korea, DPRK, one from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and one from the Supreme Command of the Korean People's Army. Both of these statements have identified the the claims that the US has included B-52 warplanes in the joint US-South Korea exercises this time as a particular irritant for the DPRK. The DPRK says that the inclusion of this warplane, together with nuclear-equipped submarines it claims also involved this time, show that the US is preparing for a kind of nuclear strike capability against the DPRK, and it has taken particular objection to these points and highlighted them more than usual. Every year, the Key Resolve and Foal Eagle go on, and as you say, the DPRK does object. The reason perhaps why this year the objections have been even more strident is because they've coincided with the latest round of sanctions announced by the United Nations in its resolution earlier this month, which followed the DPRK's nuclear test of last month. So it's difficult to see whether the strong language coming out of Pyongyang in the past few days is really something different to what has happened in past years. Certainly some of the words which mention targeting specific US bases in the Pacific region are different to in past years. And also there have been numerous mentions in the past few days from DPRK official statements that this is not mere rhetoric, that it's not only words, and that they will take action, which is again a notch higher than some of the kinds of comments in past years during this regular seasonal drills.
And Rafael, what about the cyber attacks, the major cyber shutdown at banks and broadcasters in Seoul yesterday? Has there been any word officially from North Korea? And more importantly, when you're speaking to folks there, when you're speaking to experts in this field, is the DPRK even capable of something like this? I mean, it's not exactly the most internet-savvy country in the world, is it?
There has been no word from the DPRK about yesterday's cyber attacks detected in the south. Up till now, the DPRK has been largely silent about any capability of cyber warfare. Unlike other traditional warfare means, the recent exercises or drills that we've seen highlighted in DPRK state media over the past few days of artillery and rockets and drones, the DPRK has not ever really made anything clear about its cyber warfare capability. It's all based on outside speculation, and there's nobody here who's gone on the record to talk about it. There's only one small example where the DPRK picked up on an incident last week saying that it came under a cyber attack, which certainly did cause an outage of internet service here, which I experienced last week. Although the country does not offer an internet service to the majority of its population, it is thought to have trained or tried to develop good capabilities in computing and network knowledge. Certainly, for example, this year when the chief of Google, Eric Schmidt, was here in January, he and reporters, including me, went to the Korea Computer Center, which is one of the main publicly acknowledged centers for computing and network knowledge here, and they showed an amount of software which did demonstrate some capabilities along modern lines, and it's likely that there's much more that this country is capable of. However, up till now, there has been no acknowledgement of any cyber warfare capability.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Rafael Werber, thanks very much for joining us. He's the Associated Press's senior video journalist, giving us his thoughts and perspective from Pyongyang. Meanwhile, let's talk about more cutting-edge technology. The U.S. Air Force has now launched a second missile defense satellite from Cape Canaveral in Florida. The satellite is known as GEO-2. It features scanning sensors that can cover large territories. It will further upgrade America's surveillance network to try and detect and track down missile launches around the globe. South Korean broadcaster KBS says the United States is modernizing its defense missile system to try and guard against increased threats, both from the DPRK as well as from Iran. The GEO-1 was launched in May 2011. It's troubled Air Force officials with communications glitches. Officials now saying that GEO-2 is capable of monitoring activities in at least 80% of the globe. The United Kingdom says India is still a safe place for tourists despite the number of sexual assaults that have taken place on women, both foreign tourists as well as local Indian women in recent months. The UK's Minister of State in the Foreign Office, Hugo Swire, who is now currently touring Western India, says his department's notice to British women tourists warning them about sexual assaults is only a general piece of advice. He insists that India is a safe place to visit. His comments were made a day after a British woman escaped a rape attempt in India. The incident happened early in the morning when a hotel owner repeatedly offered her an oil massage. So much so, the 30-year-old victim had to jump off from the balcony of her hotel to escape. Police have registered the case as assault, arrested the man and ordered the hotel's suspension. Although the country has robust gender laws, they're seldom enforced in India.
This is a very shameful incident, but I also commend the woman's courage that she took this brave step to save herself. In fact, there are a number of similar cases in North India.
Such a shame. It really is a shame. Stay with us here on the News Hour. When we return, we'll have all the business stories, including the new and improved Transport Ministry holding its first press conference after the NPC and CPPCC sessions, outlining its revamped responsibilities and goals for the future. Also, fresh figures showing that China's manufacturing sector has picked up in March, indicating that the country's economy is on track for a full recovery. Those stories and more when the News Hour returns. All right, welcome back. All the business stories now, in China's PMI manufacturing numbers out this morning, looking good, just like a good-looking Heidi Lum.
Cautiously good.
Oh, you want to be cautious about your looks?
Yeah, I'm cautious about China's economy.
Oh, okay.
I think everyone is. Thanks, Zaka. Let's start with some of the other headlines making news around Asia. And China's Transport Ministry has held its first press conference after the Chinese government's streamlining of its role. The spokesman, He Jianzhong, answered questions about the new role after its restructuring, which was announced during the NPC and CPPCC earlier this month. He released data from the first 2 months of this year showing that growth of roads and water transport in China remain stable. He also noted that drivers will not have to pay road tolls during the 3-day Qingming tomb sweeping holiday set to take place in early April. All right, for the latest, we're joined on the line by our reporter Su Yuting, who's covering the press conference this morning here in Beijing. Yuting, thanks for taking the time to be with us. Give us the takeaways from this morning's presser.
Hi, Hazy. Yes, I've been following the press conference here in Beijing, and you know that the Transport Ministry spokesman He Jianzhong mentioned lots of issues during the press conference. He released the statistics about the transportation situation over the past 2 months. He said the overall transportation capacity has made increasingly steady growth, and investment structure has been improved to secure smooth traffic. He also said the Ministry of Transport will emphasize the research work to build comprehensive transport network. He said the ministry will strengthen law and regulation to address the problem of traffic jam and advocate environmentally friendly green travel to make low carbon emissions. So He Jianzhong also said the three-part policy will continue to be implemented to benefit car drivers on highways during the upcoming traditional Qingming festival. That's all what I get from the press conference, Haiti.
Many thanks for bringing us the latest on that Ministry of Transport press conference in Beijing. Our reporter Su Yuting joining us live. Meanwhile, signs of growth are returning to China's vast manufacturing sector. That's according to a preliminary survey by HSBC. The HSBC Purchasing Managers Index rebounded to 51.7 in March. That is slightly higher than 50.4 in February, but still well below that 2-year high of 52.3 that we saw in January. A sub-index measuring factory output rose in March to 52.8, recovering from 50.8 in February. That's the good news, but keep this in mind. Sub-indexes measuring both input and output prices fell, indicating that we're seeing some overcapacity upstream and also sluggish demand. HSBC's chief economist says this latest data suggests that the Chinese economy is on track for a gradual recovery. All right, to get a better idea of what these numbers mean, we're joined on the line by Xiang Songzuo, who's the Chief Economist at the Agricultural Bank of China. Mr. Xiang, many thanks for taking the time to speak with us this morning. Would you say that this uptick that we're seeing in March is the start of a positive trend as we get into the year, or what's your forecast for China's manufacturing sector for the months to come?
Well, the latest figure of PMI as well as other indicators demonstrates the Chinese economy is in the process of moderate recovery. If we look at details of the new indicators of outputs and new order and all these figures demonstrate there is a moderate and even quite strong recovery in several industries. However, I forecast this trend will remain in the near future. However, there are several threats to the strong growth, even recovery of Chinese economy. The first of all is the slowing down of profit margin for many enterprises and industries. and the second is a slowing down of fiscal revenue. Putting together these two key figures, the slowing down trend will indicate there is, a threat in challenge to how to finance the investments in the near future, particularly for governments, how to finance their investment in infrastructure, which is a very important driving force for recovery and robust growth of Chinese economy. And the profit margin slowing down is still very worrying and even challenging to the enterprises' investment. So I think that the government as well as entrepreneur will must take measures to address these threats, these problems.
All right, definitely a cautious tone there. Many thanks, Mr. Xiang Songzuo, joining us. He's the Chief Economist at the Agricultural Bank of China. Well, let's take a look at how all of this is moving the markets this morning. And that pickup in Chinese factory activity did manage to spark some fresh risk appetite across the region today. Greater China shares extended their gains this morning. The Shanghai Comp pushing up that crucial 2300 level after closing at a one-week high on Wednesday. The index is currently trading up by about 0.4%. Financials on an absolute tear this morning after the official Shanghai Securities News reported that China's big five banks could post an increase in 2012 profits of as much as 12%. China Construction Bank and Bank of Communications both up 1% over in Hong Kong, while China CITIC Bank surging almost 5% in Shanghai in the morning. All right, let's take a look at the Japanese markets, where markets are back online after the spring equinox holiday yesterday. We'll get over to Tokyo with Yonggi Kang, who's standing by there. Yonggi, great to see you. And Nikkei hitting a multi-year high again today. What's pushing stocks upwards today?
Well, hi there, Heidi. Investors are coming back from a national holiday yesterday, and easing hopes are pushing Japanese stocks higher today. And this time, I'm not just talking about the BOJ. Today's moves are about the BOJ and the Fed. The U.S. Federal Reserve pledged to maintain its monetary stimulus at its FOMC meeting, which ended on Wednesday, and that gave investors a sense of relief. Here in Japan, also on Wednesday, Haruhiko Kuroda officially became the Bank of Japan governor. Kiko Iwata and Hiroshi Nakaso, they became deputy governors of the Japanese Central Bank. Now, Kuroda spoke to reporters after he got the assignment letter from Prime Minister Shinzo Abe today. Kuroda said he, along with his deputies, will do his utmost so that the Japanese economy will overcome deflation. Now, we're seeing solid gains in exporters on the back of a weekend. Sony is currently up about 2.2%. Nissan is up about 2%. And separately, one big gainer today is Yahoo Japan. That stock is up about 4.3%. The company raised its forecast range for dividend payments for the current fiscal year ending March 31st, and that's encouraging investors to buy that share.
All right, we're going to have to keep it short and sweet today. Yonggi Kang joining us in Tokyo. Many thanks for being with us. Let's take a quick look at the rest of the region now. We'll get some more details from Gautam Srinivasan, who joins us in Singapore. Good afternoon, Gautam. We've got Asian markets taking their time digesting news of this China data out this morning. What's happening right now?
Well, Heidi, we don't have much time, so I'll keep it short. One would have thought that the positive manufacturing data out from China would be a good reason for investors to buy, and we did see a slight up move in the Hang Seng and the China Enterprises Index, but currently it looks like a bit of selling is underway, and both those indices have dealing from the Shanghai Composite, which is still up around 0.5%. Probably some profit taking is happening there, considering the run-up since yesterday when the Hang Seng saw its first gain in 4 days. Looks like investors are playing this fast and easy now. The buy on dips has started to happen in the Hang Seng after it hit the 22,218 mark. So let's see how things pan out from there on. Right now we are seeing financials on an unsteady track. Bank of China is down 1.4%. Technology stocks are a mixed bag though, with Tencent down almost 4%, but Lenovo up 2.3%. Meanwhile, in Seoul, we are seeing the Kospi trimming its morning gains as a cybersecurity scare and tensions with North Korea check demand. The index is hovering around those one-month low levels, but investors say that the effects of these jitters on the market is likely to be temporary. Australia is having a seesaw day, gained in the morning after the US Federal Reserve reaffirmed its commitment to ease policy. Went down to 49.47, but now the risk appetite among investors seems to be returning. It's currently up around those 49.84 levels and seems like it's playing catch up after that sideways trend, despite worries over Cyprus moderating. Overall, looks like things could improve, and we might go into the weekend with a smile.
Let's hope we can make that happen. Many thanks for being with us. Gautam Srinivasan joining us in Singapore. Before we leave the markets, let's get a quick glimpse at how other markets around the region are doing on this Thursday afternoon. All right, so Asian markets a bit all over the place this morning, but hopefully we're headed for an upbeat end to the week. I'm Heidi Lun and you're up to date with beers. I'm going to hand you over to Zaka, and we have more wild weather stories, it seems.
Oh yeah, before that we've got a story out of Australia. It's breaking news. You might be interested because it's your home country. The Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard has now called for a leadership vote. This is after rivals within her own party asked her to step aside. She's heading a minority government in Canberra. She's been asked to step aside and make way for the former Prime Minister and the leader of the party, Kevin Rudd, to head a minority government. Remember, Australia goes to polls in the middle of September, and Julia Gillard has been facing pressure from both within her government as well as outside to step aside and make way for Kevin Rudd, the former Prime Minister. This is a rivalry that goes back many years. Let's try and get the very latest on this by speaking to our correspondent Hannah Belcher, who's joining us on the phone line from Sydney. This is an old rivalry. Kevin Rudd, once again, at it. He wants that Prime Minister's job. I mean, this is probably the second time he's done that in the last 6 months, trying to orchestrate this coup from within.
Yes, it certainly doesn't leave Labor in very good shape coming up to the September election. Look, it's been a very bad week in politics in Australia. The government started the week trying to introduce a media bill that turned into a disaster, and it all went downhill from there with rumblings over this leadership resuming. Senior Labor Minister and an Australian government elder statesman, so to speak, Simon Crean, basically told Julia Gillard to call a still. That's a vote for a fresh leader and a fresh deputy leader, and that vote will actually take place in 30 minutes from now, so it's all very tense. Julia Gillard originally said no today, and then Simon Crean, who's her arts minister, circulated a petition to force the still or the vote. So the vote will take place, as I said, in half an hour from now. And Simon Crean has encouraged Kevin Rudd to stand. The opposition leader Tony Abbott, tried to move a vote of no confidence earlier in the day, but that failed. Now, even if Kevin Rudd wins, the Labor government is still likely to lose the election. So this is a very close leadership vote, and it's very bad for the Labor government. They need a decisive result. Julia Gillard ousted Kevin Rudd from the Labor leadership and Prime Ministership of Australia in 2010, of course, and she really has had very little public support since then. There have been 27 opinion polls since she became Prime Minister, and the government has trailed in all 27 of them. So we're watching this space very carefully.
And all of this coming 6 months before the general election, which, according to many people, at least in Australia, they feel the Liberals will come back to power and Tony Abbott will become Prime Minister. Hannah Belcher, thanks for joining us on the phone line from Sydney with that intriguing case of politics in Australia. Stay with us here on the News Hour. When we return, intriguing case of the weather, something that Heidi was mentioning. 8 people killed, more than 100 injured in a hailstorm in one of the most unlikeliest places in China, in the southern city of Dongguan. And guess who's visiting Beijing? David Beckham. He's here to get first-hand information before he goes around the world trying to promote Chinese football. Welcome back. The test flight of China's first independently developed Y-20 transport aircraft has now entered a new stage. The aircraft completed 2 taxi tests after it successfully recorded its first test flight. That was on the 26th of January this year. The transport aircraft can perform long-distance air transport or different materials and personnel under complicated weather. Development of the plane took just 5 years, 2/3 of the time used for similar aircraft around the world. The plane plays an important role in promoting the construction of China's economy, as well as national defense modernization and responding to emergencies like disaster rescue and humanitarian assistance. Let's talk about disaster rescue. 8 people have been killed and more than 100 injured in a hailstorm in the southern Chinese city of Dongguan as storms swept Fujian, Hunan and Guangdong provinces. Heavy rainfall has hit more than 50 counties and cities in Fujian, and a hailstorm has caused property losses in at least 9 counties in the central province of Hunan. Dongguan municipal government says 2 of the wounded sustained serious injuries. The local government has sent a work team to the disaster-hit areas to help with the relief work there. All right, time to get all the sports news, and David now joins us. Your fellow name person is in China, just like other retired footballers?
Yeah, that's
Namesake
right.
was the word I was looking for.
Yeah,
sorry.
namesake is the word. It's another David, not this one.
The just slightly more famous one, David Beckham. He'll get his first look at Chinese football as he visits the Workers' Stadium in Beijing later. The new soccer ambassadors to China will meet some of Guan's players and other officials as he begins his quest to promote Chinese football around the world. The former England captain received a warm welcome at the airport yesterday. His appointment coincides with the 20-year anniversary of professional football in China. Beckham's the latest star name attracted here, following Didier Drogba and Nicolas Anelka, who played in Shanghai for a season. Beckham's in the kingdom for 4 days and will also visit Qingdao and Wuhan.
You know, the biggest country in the world, and there's so many young children here that want to play the game and want to become professional, and hopefully I could give them advice and help them. So I'm here for the future. I'm here to be an ambassador for the grassroots football and for the you know, the continued success of the game leading forward.
24. That's the winning run the Miami Heat are on now after they came from 27 points down to beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. LeBron James recorded a triple-double as the Florida team won 98-95. We'll have more on that later in the day in sports scene, but it's not the only hot streak in the association right now, although Denver are just a little way behind Miami at 13 wins back-to-back, and they took out Oklahoma City to get to the Baker's dozen. Denver also looking for their third straight win against OKC, and OKC would get in transition early. Kevin Durant doing his thing, and the Thunder are up a deuce. Then his running mate, Russell Westbrook, was able to get to the cup. OKC take a lead into the break. After the recess, Westbrook was at it again, converting the alley-oop. The Thunder point guard finishing the night with 25, but we're even at 68. And Denver would turn up the intensity defensively and take the lead. Kenneth Faried hustling back on the defense to keep the Nuggets ahead by 6. Then they force a turnover and get out on the break here. Andre Iguodala finishes with the cram, and the lead swells to 10. Off to the fourth quarter, and Iggy was once again playing above the rim, finishing with the reverse as Denver continue to lead by double digits. OKC would try and get back into it. Kevin Martin finishes the fast break. It's a 7-point margin now. But then the wily veteran Andre Miller seals it. 20 on the night for Miller as he celebrates his 37th birthday with a success. Denver holds on for a 114-104 win, extending their lead to 13. As a member of the Beijing Ducks, Stephen Marbury has been a champion, an emotional leader, and even presented with a bronze statue. And now Marbury has a new role as a coach, an ironic twist for the man who was known as a coach killer for his moody attitude towards authority during his NBA playing days. But now the 36-year-old guard will serve as an assistant coach for Beijing as they prepare for this year's China National Games. Marbury will work under his current Beijing Ducks head coach, Min Lulei. The National Games take place every 4 years and are a separate entity from the CBA season, pitting province against province. Qualifying for the Games takes place in late April, and the 2-week competition proper is in August at the Games in Liaoning. Guangdong won the basketball tournament back in 2009.
Coach invited me to be the coach. I feel like he has confidence and faith in me, which is very important, especially for my future here in Beijing.
Sports Scene is along in just over 2 hours' time. We will have more on that amazing run of victories by the Miami Heat and, of course, on David Beckham's visit.
All right, thanks very much, David, with all the sports stories. Well, spring is here, at least in most parts of the world, most parts of China as well, maybe not in Beijing, but in Wuhan, at the famous university there, the cherry blossoms are under the spotlight. This year, though, not for the most flattering reason. In spring of last year, about 1 million people came to the university to witness the blossoming of these cherry blossoms. But this year, in order to try and limit the large crowds, the university has done something pretty routine, some would say, but it's heckled a lot of feathers, and that is doubled ticket prices from 10 bucks now to 20 yuan. The price hike has stirred a huge debate, both within the university and outside, about what exactly this money is going to be used for. Yu Li takes a closer look.
Ticket prices doubling hasn't stopped these enthusiastic visitors. Every March, this area looks more like a crowded park than a university campus. Visitors from all over the country come to Wuhan University to witness cherry blossoms in full bloom.
We came all the way from Shenzhen. I think it's reasonable to charge some kind of a fee.
We originally planned to go elsewhere, but then decided on seeing the cherry blossoms at Wuhan University. We came at the right season, and it is cheaper than other scenic spots, which cost 40 to 50 yuan anyway.
Every day before 8 a.m. and after 5 p.m., entrance to the university is free. That's the peak time when other university students come.
We got here at 4 to 8 in the morning, right before charges applied. It's a little expensive for students. If students could get a discount, that would be nice.
But now there are concerns that Wuhan University will look to profit off the cherry blossom season. Some are asking what the money will be used for. Others argue that instead of charging money, there should be quotas to control the number of visitors at a given time.
We can't control visitors. One day last spring, tens of thousands of people swarmed into our university from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. It was completely out of control. There weren't enough policemen. How can you ensure the safety of students and visitors in such a case?
About 1 million people visited Wuhan University during the cherry blossom season last year. The huge numbers raised a lot of safety concerns. And for the students here, visitors are creating a burden on campus life.
A lot of stuff goes missing. Traffic is terrible. It's crowded everywhere. We can't even have a meal at the cafeteria. Not to mention that some visitors climb onto the cherry blossom trees. Some pick the flowers and wear them on their heads. We're really angry at such behavior.
A 500-member volunteer team was set up to protect the sakura trees at Wuhan University. They also tended to older trees and those infected with insects. The school says charging entrance fees will limit the number of visitors and help pay for the costs of managing visitors during the cherry blossom season.
We built 300 temporary sanitary facilities, which cost about 100,000 yuan. We hired many staff to help us maintain order. That all costs money.
Wuhan University earned about 10 million yuan from its cherry blossom tickets last year. Most people were fine with the fees, but just wanted to make sure the money was being spent responsibly. Now the university is trying to balance keeping its own students happy while allowing the public to get a share of the beauty for a small price. Yuli, CCTV.
All right, from Wuhan to Washington, D.C., there's something about cherry blossoms and the arrival of spring as we await spring here in Beijing, especially after yesterday's snowfall. That should do it in this edition of the News Hour. From me, Zaka Jacob, and the rest of the News Hour team, thanks very much for your time, folks. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time. Until then, enjoy Dialogue. It's coming right up. Bye-bye.
Since 1996, leaders from the countries met with each other at least twice a year, including at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summits. Analysts say this demonstrates that the bilateral relationship hinges on a strong legal understanding and is based on extensive and long-term strategic interests of the two countries.
As major powers in the world and permanent members of the UN Security Council, China and Russia share the same or similar positions on many international and regional issues. They oppose unilateralism and hegemony and promote a multipolar world. They do not seek an alliance, but cooperate for safety and stability.
Booming economic and trade cooperation is a driving force behind their relations. This centers around energy, as China is one of the largest consumers of Russian oil. Last year, the trade volume between China and Russia reached a historical high of $88.2 billion, up 11.2% from the year before. China is now Russia's largest trading partner. Both sides hope to boost their bilateral trade volume to over $100 billion this year. However, there is still much to be achieved in terms of Sino-Russian strategic cooperation.
The two peoples should increase exchanges, which have not been as intensive as intergovernmental activities. Only people-to-people understanding can lay a more solid foundation for the sound development of bilateral ties.
And a key step in boosting this traditional friendship and strengthening trust was through cultural promotion. The Year of Russia was held in China in 2006, while Russia hosted the Year of China in 2007. The new Chinese President Xi Jinping will begin his official state visit
in countries. While in Africa, Xi Jinping will also meet with the leaders of the so-called BRICS countries during the 5th Leaders Summit in Durban, South Africa.
Nearly 20 events are packed into 1.5 days. President Xi Jinping will be very busy talking to Russian leaders and attending ceremonial events. This time, he's bringing more than just reassurances on political relations.
Both presidents are expected to sign a manifesto spelling out the directions for the future development of Sino-Russian relations and key cooperation fields between the two countries.
President Xi's visit will further promote and deepen cooperation between the two countries and translate the good political atmosphere into practical cooperation projects.
There has been some debate on China-Russia ties, questioning why the political intimacy hasn't translated into enough practical benefits for the two sides. But this time, the two neighbors have set a tone of practicality for President Xi's visit.
The two countries share great potential in cooperating in energy, aerospace, aviation, investment, and other fields. The relevant Chinese firms are all in Moscow, making continual progress with negotiations. They're trying to reach an agreement to increase oil transactions and build pipelines in eastern China and Russia and sign the relevant contracts.
President Xi will then continue his multi-nation tour to South Africa to attend the 5th BRICS Summit. Deepening financial cooperation will be one of the major topics during the summit. Accompanying President Xi will be China's new First Lady, Ms. Peng Liyuan, someone eager media outlets will surely be waiting to snap a photo of. The First Lady used to be a very popular folk singer in China, but has rarely hit the stage in recent years. During their visit, Ms. Peng Liyuan will join other First Ladies in several activities. British newspaper The Financial Times believes Ms. Peng Liyuan will be a new force behind China's soft power. Wang Xinye, CCTV.
Chinese President Xi Jinping will also give a speech to students at the Moscow College of International Relations. The college, which is in the southwest suburbs of Moscow, is Russia's most famous as well as most influential educational institute when it comes to international relations and humanities. Some of its prominent alumni includes the current Foreign Minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov. Many Chinese students will be among the 1,000-plus audience, and the speech will also be recorded, so those who cannot attend it live will be able to watch it on the internet.
I want to know what kind of person Xi Jinping is as ordinary person, not just his role as a president. What he has to say and how he thinks about life and our country and our lives.
I hope to see how this high-level visit promotes further military cooperation, political communication and cultural exchange.
Now, Sino-Russian relations have maintained a good momentum of growth in the past several years. As our Nia Jia tells us, mutual political trust has deepened as well as economic cooperation improved.
Good neighbors, friends, and partners. Close Sino-Russian relations have seen steady progress. 12 years ago, China and Russia signed a 20-year political treaty of friendship and cooperation. During Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to Beijing in October 2004, an agreement was signed settling a long-standing dispute over the shared 4,300-kilometer border.
Reaching out, China's foreign ministry announces President Xi Jinping's first visit as head of state to Russia and then to the African continent. The United States launches another missile defense satellite aimed at detecting and tracking missiles right around the globe. This one can reach up to 80% of all global territory. Fresh figures show China's manufacturing sector has picked up in March, indicating the country's economy is well on track for a full recovery. And it's the wrath of Mother Nature. 8 people are killed and more than 100 injured in a hailstorm in China's southern city of Dongguan. It is noon here in Beijing. 60 minutes of the best stories from China, Asia and right around the world. We'll have a special report a little later on here on the News Hour about the cyber attacks which completely blockaded major broadcasters as well as banks in South Korea. And in the latter half of the program, we will have the top business as well as sports stories. But first up on the News Hour, we will be talking about Chinese President Xi Jinping, who will be leaving for Russia this Friday to start what is going to be his first overseas visit as China's new head of state. China's foreign ministry says President Xi will then visit Tanzania, South Africa and the Republic of Congo. While in South Africa, he will be attending the 5th BRICS leaders meeting in Durban. In Russia, in Moscow, he will meet his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. The visit aims to promote the China-Russia strategic partnership. President Xi Jinping's African trip aims to promote cooperation with African countries in the respect that China is the largest developing country in the world, while Africa is home to the largest number of developed.
To Russia on Friday. This will be the first country he visits after taking office before heading to BRICS summit in South Africa. Many expect that visit to be an important one in setting the tone of relations between China and Russia in the new era. As comprehensive strategic partners, the two giant neighbors are fulfilling their pledge of friends forever, enemies never. 叶角 CCTV, Beijing.
Now, the number of tourists traveling between China and Russia demonstrates just how close these two countries are, not just physically, but also people to people. China is now Russia's second biggest source of tourists, while Russians are China's third biggest source. While sightseeing is always very popular, culture and customs keep people coming back for more. Guan Yang reports from Harbin, which is one of China's major cities closest to Russia.
It really doesn't matter if you can't speak Russian. The music and dance will tune you in. It's not even the holiday season yet, but this traditional folk dance is pulling in the crowds. At one of the Harbin's hottest Russian theaters, you can really feel the passion. It is as if you were in Moscow. 40 minutes drive from bustling downtown, the Volga Manor offers a quiet and relaxing afternoon, surrounded by exquisite Russian art. It attracts many visitors, some from much warmer climates.
Initially, when we built the manor, it was based on the idea of combining Harbin's history with its Russian legacy. But as the place was developing, we thought why not turn the business into a grand Russian cultural banquet. It's attracted thousands of visitors each year, especially from tropical Southeast Asia.
There are stores selling